Okay, I can't do that. There you go. All right. So, frivolity and unction. That's a great word, isn't it? What does unction mean? Did you look up that word? You better get out your digital devices.
It's like something that heals or like saves somebody. Like extreme unction is the oil that they put on dying people who are Catholic. Like if they want to help them die the right way.
Oh, okay. Well, that's pretty good. What does the word unction mean? That's pretty close. I mean, it is pretty close. It's a soothing or transforming or placating oil or, right, some balm.
Okay.
Yes? And it's supposed to make you better, right? There are several definitions of unction. Yes?
Is it like if you say something with unction, it's like it's something like with a lot of like meaning, it's a lot of depth or something. It's meant to like.
I think it doesn't have a pejorative connotation. That is a negative connotation.
In this essay it does.
What?
In this essay it does.
Well, I mean, I grew up in the South, and my grandmother used to say, "Oh, she's very unctuous."
Unctuous.
It's on.
It's on, it's streaming.
Hmm? I hope it is. You want to check it?
I trust you, but yes, we're streaming.
Woo! Oh, unctuous is a little different. I just looked it up and it says it means if somebody is excessively or ingratiatingly flattering. Like when somebody has like an oily voice.
One more time with feeling. What did you say?
I think that unctuous is a little different. I looked it up and it says that it means if a person is speaking in a ingratiating or flattering way.
Insincere
Yeah.
or holier than thou tone. I think it's what it really implies.
Yeah, maybe.
Excessive piousness.
Yes, see there? Holier than thou. Like, you know, right? So I'll fix everything. Okay. You know those kind of people? Yes, okay. All right. So, frivolity and unction. Wow. This essay appears at close to the end of this book because all of a sudden the tone becomes like guillotine-like. And it's a very, very serious essay, only in the way that Mr. Hickey can be serious, which is, you know, not too serious. But it deals with a topic that's extremely serious, I think. And it is filled with a lot of SAT vocabulary, right? And to Mr. Hickey, it's just like normal. And I think it's really, really great. Well, he begins this with a recollection of a 60 Minutes episode. Any of you watch 60 Minutes? You watched the 60 Minutes most recently? One of them? No. It's so ridiculous to think it's degenerated to that. Well, he talks about this thing on contemporary art, I think. And it says, it was just the same old fatuous, pretentious art world. What is fatuous?
I even Googled it, but that's like a week and a half ago now.
What does fatuous mean? Stupid, ridiculous, okay? Pretentious art, well, you know what that is. Pretentious art world. And nothing confirms me more strongly in my choice of professions, as an art critic, you know, than a good healthy dose of sturdy, know-nothing, middle American outrage at the caprices of this world. And he's speaking specifically of the outrage against the art world. You know, people look at a painting by Jackson Pollock and like my Aunt Beverly, you know, go into paroxysms of like, I don't know what, like it's the end of the world or something. That's not art. So that's what he's talking about, right? And so this essay is about why the art world was plunged into that kind of battle between the public and the intelligentsia of the art world. And I think that it has a direct correlation to our own world. He says it doesn't, but the kind of music and theater that he's talking about, the music is not, you know, classical music, I think. Okay, so let's go on. At the top of the next page, what is Luce or Luce Publications?
Oh, wasn't
Any
that
idea?
the publisher that like kind of like owned Time and like Life and all those like
Time
really-
Magazine.
Yeah, the really
Yes.
like mainstream magazines.
Time Magazine, absolutely. He says that I inferred from the Lucci's publication sneering coverage of Jackson Pollock's unruly triumph and Andy Warhol's apocalyptic opening at the Institute of Contemporary Art in Philadelphia. Where is that?
New York.
It says it's in Philadelphia.
Well,
It could be in New York, right? Does it
Sounds-
exist here anymore?
I guess not.
No, I don't think so. Have any of you been to the Barnes? That kind of upgrade? How many of you ever been to the Barnes, the original institute?
The original?
Yeah.
I would say that for that actually.
Oh, in Marion or wherever it is.
It's
I went.
outside of Philadelphia, quite a
It's
bit.
like around the corner from Mr. Coopersmith's house. I think.
Oh, yeah? Mhm. Okay. It says, we recognize the smirky, condescending tone of these stories, but kids are expert in decoding this tone, which invariably means this may look like fun, but don't do it. Right? Well, how about that? Does music look like fun, but don't do it? I don't know. Do you hear those kind of remarks about the music world these days? Okay. Well, look at them down in the next paragraph. The world portrayed Morley Safer's essay on 60 Minutes did not look like fun. No matter how artfully decoded, the piece was not going to lure any children out of the roller rink in Las Cruces. It was obsessed with money, virtue, and class hatred, issues ill-designed to put your thumb out in the wind. What on earth does that mean?
Is that like
He's talking about the art world. It was obsessed with money, virtue, and class hatred.
for
What is class hatred?
rich versus poor?
Well, I think in this context it might, right? What's the distinction that everyone makes between the rich and the poor? This brings up, to me, maybe trivial things for you, but very important things that should never leave your mind. What's the distinction that's normally made between rich and poor?
Rich people have something, poor people don't.
And what is it that they have? Not money. Let's take money out of it.
Class. Or in case-
Opportunity?
Here it's like cultural implications.
Yes, definitely. And so with culture comes what?
Elitism?
Maybe. But it's not the kind of elitism that I think that artists represent. What? What might you think? If it's not money, and if it's culturally connected, and you said it's associated with opportunity and cream cheese.
Education.
Yes,
Oh.
education, right. That kind of class difference they're talking about is the difference between uneducated people and educated people. Now, tell me that that is not circulating in the music world, the classical music world. Now look, when I say things, I'm not dictating what you should believe or what you should think. I'm like a Greek tragedy, holding up ideas in front of you for you to contemplate, right? That's what the word entertainment means anyway, right? To hold up in front of, or to suspend in front of. So I don't ask that you buy all this. I ask that you think clearly about it, right? And go through it. Okay, so ill issues designed to put your thumb out in the wind. Okay, and so he uses the word unction at the bottom of the page. Also, Safer's piece did present some possibilities. It was not going to lure any loonies out of the woodwork, but what a delicious straight man Safer was. What an exquisite target for dazzling repartee, for manifestations of élan, for demonstrations of panache, and other French attitudinal stratagems that might constitute a lively and confident response to Morley's mid-cult unction. What is mid-cult?
Like the leader of a cult?
He's in the middle of the... Is he the mid-cult unction? Who is the mid-cult? Doesn't it refer to Middle America or the attitudes towards contemporary art?
Like popular culture?
Yes, well,
It's actually the name of a book.
what?
Well, it's part of a book title by Dwight MacDonald, which is an inquiry into American popular culture and the role of the middle brows and the distortion of cultural values.
Distortion of cultural value? Well, you'll be surprised if you've read this essay. This makes, he's trying to make a point. And it's not a positive point either. Mid-cult unction. Morley who? 60 what? You watch TV on Sunday night? Right? Okay. In the following week, well, what is he doing here? He's saying that the response to this kind of outrage by Middle America to the contemporary art world was met in the art world by this kind of flare-up of how dare you criticize, contemporary art. You know-nothings. And it's the reason why culture is degenerated in modern times, because you're not educated to appreciate the progress that art represents. Isn't that what it's saying? That's a nice attitude, right? Now I'm telling you, this connects directly with Ludwig van, right? And what we're going to look at today. All right, well, continuing on. What did you get out of this? I'll stop talking for a minute and you tell me. What do you think the point of this whole essay is?
That we shouldn't be treating artistic endeavors as, I guess, something like so pretentious, in a sense. We should just treat it as the entertainment was once meant to represent, and let other people get in, because then they think he has a job.
Yes.
I think, one thing that I got out of it was to kind of, he's trying to make the point that we should free ourselves from those, what we were just talking about, this kind of ideas or frames of cultural judgment or what's considered valuable in those senses, to free ourselves from that and from the expectation to fulfill or validate, feed into that. Not have that be pleasing or fulfilling that part of the culture as part of the art making process.
Okay. Anybody else?
Art doesn't have to exist to help somebody or change the world. And in fact, it's
Ooh.
better if the artist doesn't see it as doing that.
Well, that's one of the huge points, is it not? Doesn't that relate to the unction business? I believe so. And, this essay was written, a couple of decades ago, I think, perhaps. And I think it's just as relevant today as it was then. Okay, and so what is on the very next page? He says, so consider for a moment the enormous benefits that would accrue to us all if art were considered bad, silly, and frivolous. And he goes on to make 3 different points about that. What if art were bad, silly, and frivolous? Now, I'm making the connection between visual art and other art forms. He says that people in the music world and in the movie world would not have reacted to visual art like Warhol and Pollock, and maybe not so much Rothko, because all it is like, color blocks. But many others, right? Wouldn't have that music world and the theater world would not have reacted in that kind of indignant way or unctuous way. But I think he's wrong about the classical music world. And so what if you think about art as being bad, silly, and frivolous? Imagine the lightness we would feel if this burden of hypocrisy were lifted from our shoulders, the sheer joy of it. At the bottom of the page, might not this empower artists to be more sensitive to the power and promise of what they do, to be more concerned with good effects rather than with dramatizing their good intentions? What if works of art were considered to be what they actually are? Frivolous objects or entities with no intrinsic value that only acquire value through a complex process of socialization during which some are empowered by an ongoing sequence of private, mercantile, journalistic, and institutional investments that are irrevocably extrinsic to them and to any intention they might embody. Gosh, what is he talking about there?
It's just markings on a piece of canvas.
But he says, okay, right, what if it's frivolous, bad, and what was the third thing he says? And what?
Silly.
So what if a work of art like that, okay? Frivolous objects or entities with no intrinsic value, but they only acquire value through this complex process of socialization during which some works are empowered by an ongoing sequence of private, mercantile, journalistic, and institutional investments. All right, well, what are all of those things? Can we close that door? Do you mind?
It's an embodiment of the different classes. This is like the rich, private, or I guess it embodies that, sort of empowering certain works of art that in the end have no value and in the end aren't connected, but sort of have this weak link that say, this is art, this is what you should be spending your money on.
Yeah, but he's just said that art is frivolous.
Oh, that's what I mean.
And it's not intrinsic to the work of art, right?
Yeah.
But for art to have any kind of hold in the world, or to mean anything,
It has to be appealing without being explained.
isn't that the process of socialization? There has to be some mechanism for it to relate to society.
And individuals.
What?
And individuals.
And individuals, right?
I guess
Now this is a complex statement here, and I think it directly relates to the world of Beethoven. Directly to it, and actually the world before Beethoven. Probably much earlier than that.
It just seems so, like we're going into a different time where that's not possible anymore. What he's talking about.
But he thinks that this is not possible anymore?
Like this ideal is, I think it's like we passed a threshold, especially with internet and everything like that. Like, what we view as, like what can capture people's attention, what is considered an audience, that's totally changing in a fundamental way.
But isn't he saying that art, if it's gonna survive in this way, has to continue to be to relate to people and to appeal to people, and no matter how our technology develops and how our tastes and habits and values change. I think is what he's saying.
Yeah, well, isn't the internet and social media the current process of an aspect of the current process of socialization? Aren't we embroiled right now at this very moment with an aspect of socialization that has come up via the internet?
I have a question.
Public and private information, yes.
What is socialization? Exactly. What does that word mean? 'Cause I've only well.
Socialization between people, not socialization as like a work of art.
Yeah.
No, the work of art has to become socialized, right?
What does that mean to become
Yeah.
socialized?
It means that it has to become an element of society,
Okay.
or an attribute of society, something that society thinks about, cares about, and is interested in, and basically likes.
Right.
But don't you think that those things, like art that is that, or that people care about, or that is part of society in that real way that he's referring to, not in the superficial, institutional way, that still exists is what it is, even though there is, amidst the BS, that there is. So it's like good art always has the capability and the natural ability to become part of culture.
Yeah, I don't think that's what he's saying. I think he's saying, he's debunking that idea.
Right. I think he's
I
saying
really do.
art is unable to be socialized if it weren't for people that attributed some sort of meaning to that art.
That I think is true.
There's nothing intrinsic to the art itself that makes people believe in it. It's just that people see some part of their lives reflected in the art, and they decide that it's somehow worthwhile.
Yes, because he says that those things are extrinsic to the work of art.
Yeah.
And there might be some art that continues, people continue to find meaning in, throughout, over a long period of time, even if culture changes or whatever.
Well, what is the meaning? See, this brings it all back to the same topic that I hammer away at all the time. What is meaning? How do people find meaning in this? Why is it that with the kind of superficial changes in culture, and in the modern world, the superficial changes in culture are almost always connected with what?
Private, mercantile, journalistic, and institutional investment.
Well, those are the mechanisms, but what is modern culture generally associated with? The changes in culture. Look at Dubai. Look at Hong Kong, where you just were. Actually, as I think about it, it's probably been one of the catalytic forces in culture forever.
In what sense?
Well, that's what I'm asking you. What is the sense? What drives value? You know, that Wittgenstein thing that he didn't write, but it's put together from all of his writings post 1920, called Culture and Value.
Isn't it arbitrary? Or at least I think it is. Driving value?
Well, the meaning part of it is of course, I think, tied to something that is arbitrary and oddly meaningless. But what drives culture in the modern world? What has driven it? One of the major factors. It's not the only thing that has driven it.
Religion.
Well, that's always kind of driven it, and that's tied to worldview. But the worldview is also tied to what? Everyone in this room, I think, has on their person a digital device, right? Mine's over there, right? I have the latest one, the U-phone, right? Or We-phone, I guess it should be called, right? Doesn't that drive the contemporary, cultural milieu of the world, actually? Unless you probably live in Calcutta or someplace like that, and I doubt it.
So technology?
Yes, of course.
I was thinking influx of wealth. Which
Well, what drives the
allows for-
technology?
Well, I guess having the resources to improve things and innovate and things like that.
And then the innovations themselves generate
Yeah.
enormous wealth. I could be wrong. Somebody challenge that if you want to, right? I used to talk about Bill Gates a lot. I don't talk about him anymore. Right?
I guess this is, taking a couple steps back from where we are now, but when I read that, I think he was talking about the complex process of socialization through private, mercantile, journalistic, and institutional investments, I thought that sort of meant that it was divorced from the individual and the actual people of society. And so I thought he was saying that the extrinsic meaning assigned to art isn't in our hands, but it's in the hands of a bunch of people who have sort of created this, impression of intelligentsia for themselves, and then they dictate to us what art's supposed to mean.
Yes, but I think what he's primarily saying is that the work of art has nothing to do with that, right?
Yeah.
And so that it is through this process, in some measure or another, we are related to art. It becomes an aspect of socialization.
I see, but sorry to cut you off. But I think that process of socialization, ironically, we don't have any part in that. I think that's like an extra layer.
Well, who does have a part in it?
The private, mercantile,
Yeah, but who?
same as
What is that?
a subset of us, but not us.
Yes, it's people.
It's
right?
people, but I don't think it's all people. I think that by doing this, he's drawn out these specific subsets that don't always have our views in mind.
It's possible, and I think he's making the point that the idea of socialization that involves, he says it is through a complex process in which some are empowered by an ongoing sequence of private, mercantile, journalistic, and institutional investments that are irrevocably extrinsic to them. and to any intention that they might embody. So he's not specifying total institutionalism or total every journalist, every merchant, or every aspect of money. Someone has to buy the art or pay for it, yes. Someone has to write about it and for other people to know about it. Maybe. Yeah?
I guess so, yeah.
All right, but I think later on, right in the very next sentence, what if we admitted that, unlike 17th century France, institutional and education accreditation are presently insufficient to invest works of art with an aura of public import. See, I think he's viewing those mechanisms as a means of extrinsically, imputing to the work of art some kind of public value. Right. Now, go back up here to this complex socialization process. If we think about Beethoven, right, does this not fit in to the relationship of music in that world, in his world, in Vienna? Right? Who is the private? We're going to look at the Beethoven Second Symphony, like 10 bars of that. Right? Who paid for that? Beethoven had like 5 different patrons. Wisnowski, right? Isn't that who paid for that? Right? And where was it performed? It's the Beethoven Second Symphony. It was first premiered, I believe, if my memory is correct, probably not, but sometimes in 1803.
Yes, April 5th.
Well, it's just passed.
Conducted by
where?
the composer.
What venue?
The Theater of Vienna.
Theater an der Wien, right? What is that? Anybody know what that is? That is not the Theater an der Wieden. Although it was Schikaneder's theater. It's his new theater. Right? What's important about the Schikaneder theater? Some people say, oh, it's the Theater an der Wien, but that wasn't existent at the time of the premiere of The Magic Flute. That was in the old theater. However, plans were already underway to build the new Theater an der Wien. And that does not refer to Vienna. It refers to the river, the dried up riverbed over which that new theater was built. And I think there was like a market underneath it or something like that.
Yeah, the Naschmarkt, the open air market, is the covered riverbed now houses that, according to Wikipedia.
Well, thank you for Wikipedia. Well, okay. All right, so the mercantile aspect, that paid for that. Then Beethoven rented that theater, right? And presented his Second Symphony, along with what? Anybody know this? You just didn't present a symphony.
He also presented his third piano concerto in the Oratorio Christ on the Mount of Olives.
Any of you ever heard of the Christ on the Mount of Olives oratorio by Beethoven?
I've heard some movements of it, actually.
I bet you've heard one movement, which is what? The Hallelujah chorus from that, right? Okay, well that's an obscure work of Beethoven, right? Wasn't the First Symphony also performed on that concert? I could be wrong. So it's like the First Symphony, the Third Piano Concerto, the Oratorio, Christ on the Mount of Olives, and the Second Symphony. My gosh! They've been there all night, right? How would you like to go to a program like that?
It wasn't the only time you did it too.
No, I know.
Premiere of the.
Well, I mean,
was like that.
You know, there's a fantastic book that talks about concert life in Vienna from the end of the 18th century through Beethoven's time, and how towards the end of the 18th century things had kind of calmed down, and then after or during Beethoven's lifetime there was a big crescendo in public or concert going again. And the new theater, Theatron de Wien, was a principal outlet for these new public concerts. It was supposed to have been, in my recollection, the most elaborate theater, and the most technologically advanced. So it would be on the caliber of something like the Metropolitan Opera, right? Very technically advanced. So it was that was like the cutting edge venue, performing venue. Okay, so what about the journalistic aspect of it? There were reports of these concerts in newspapers, right?
I have a quote if you want.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, and institutional investments. Were there any institutional investments back then?
Like courts.
Yeah, do they count?
What?
Do they count?
What, like
The court?
the court of Lichnowsky?
Sure.
I don't think that's what he's talking about. They're talking about like the Conservatory of Leipzig. Or the Leipzig Conservatory. Have you ever been in there? Isn't that the Felix Mendelssohn Conservatory? Right. All the organs in there are like Barker Lever practice organs. At least they used to be.
Basically no X.
Right. Now? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So, the next paragraph. If we do this, we can stop regarding the art world as a world. Now, this is what I think is so great. Or a community. Or a market. And begin thinking of it as a semi-public. This is the qualifying statement from the one above. Semi-public, semi-mercantile, semi-institutional agora. What is an agora?
Open market.
It was the central focus of whatever society existed in the Greek and Roman world, right? Maybe the Greek world, right? Now, have any of you ever been to Greece or been to Delphi and the so-called Oracle at Delphi? That's an amazing site. Well, the first thing when you approach the site, you approach the agora, which is the open public place where everyone would gather. And then you go through, then the Temple of Apollo is there, where the Pythia would sit on the tripod and make these pronouncements. But then all these places had these treasuries or places where money was kept or you could donate to. So the agora is a place where public opinion is exchanged. Philosophers pontificated in the agora. All right. Right, at the bottom of the page, because, wait a minute, the art world conducts an ongoing referendum on how things should look and the way we should look at things. Or it would if art were regarded as sports art, as a wasteful, privileged endeavor through which very serious issues are sorted out. That's a remarkable statement.
I don't know if that's true though. Or I kind of disagree. Like the way he describes what sports mean to people. Like I think in general people find art much more frivolous than sports.
Really?
At least in this country, I think.
Well, why,
So too.
why would they say that?
Because
Sports is serious then?
Yeah, and it has.
Well,
a-
isn't that what he just said?
An objective.
Sports are places where serious things are sorted out. What on earth does he mean by that? Did you not read the essay on the heresy of defense, zone defense?
Mhm.
It connects directly with that idea. Hence, why we're reading this particular essay after that. What were the ideas in that essay? And I think it's, one of Hickey's beautiful metaphorical ideas. What about the basketball court, the game of basketball? And he says it, he repeats it in here when he goes through the notions of football and basketball and baseball. He calls baseball bucolic. And he calls football, what does he call that? Corporate, or bureaucratic, which is what it is. And he calls professional basketball improvisatory. So what did you say, Oliver?
Oh, well, I kind of understood he was saying it would, if art was viewed as sports, as something that's like frivolous and, or like has, I can't remember his exact wordings, yet also that that it sorts out serious issues, like, but I think that actually the reality is that it's the opposite, that sports are, at least like in the culture in this country, seen as something with like objective value and something that's like less frivolous than art, actually. Like, I think that that notion of like high art and is actually very detached from like the public psyche these days. Like, it's not really important to people. They disregard it. It doesn't really affect them, and they ignore.
Right, but he's saying that the popularity of sports is what?
Reflects something about how, like, sports does something that we can all relate to. I think he made some sort of point about how it's like a way of like organizing the violence that is all a part of us into something that's more like
Controlled
yeah.
or sublimated.
But
Yeah, but
I get what you're saying though.
they talk about like people people being impressionable or just following suit because that's the culture, what's told to be valuable. I mean, like sports culture, you have like, victory parades or people die-hard fans of their team just because they're from a place but they actually have no genuine connection sometimes with the act of the sport, like they wouldn't have if not for that system. So I think it's like all these things can become that.
I think he doesn't make a distinction enough between like what sports are for somebody who participates in it and like what like the Eagles like hero worship type of thing, like what football is for a lot of people.
Well, I just invite you to think about that analogy and then turn back the clock and you think about the relationship of music to whatever society participated in music. Because, finally, the art world is no more a community than Congress is a community. Although, like Congress, it is in danger of becoming one and losing its status as a forum of contested values where we vote on the construction and constituency of the visible world. Works of art are candidates aspiring to represent complex constituencies. All of this, both of these pages, they kind of go together, right? So what is his definition of a work of art? Is a candidate or an object, right, aspiring to represent some complex constituents.
Almost like the work of art is like a blank canvas, and like what we find in it is the actual act of painting or creation on it.
And how is it that we find that?
Complex process of socialization.
Yes, through the process of socialization. And what is that? It has to include some aspect of ownership, right? Somebody's got to invest in the work of art. So that involves the money. Then somebody's got to write about it. And then currently there has to be some kind of institutional investment in it. All right. Then here are the 3 points that he's trying to make. First, if art were considered a bad, silly, and frivolous thing to do, works of art could fail. That's a huge point. What prevents works of art, particularly musical works of art, from failing?
Institutional support.
Yes, exactly. Institutional support. Why? Because there is no sports fan, right? There are no more sports fans. That's a really bad thing, in my opinion. Okay, and what's the second point? Oh, and this I think is really great. The last paragraph on the page. In warrior cultures, there is no failure. There is only victory and death. In institutional cultures, there is neither failure nor success. Only the largus or spite of one's superiors. What is the largus? What is that?
Stipends.
Support.
The generosity or the ingratiating, whatever support until you do something that they don't like, right? Or the incredible spitefulness that goes on within faculties and people working in institutions. Of course, you know nothing about that kind of stuff, right? Okay. Failure, however, is neither death nor the death of institutional life. It's simply the failure of one's peers, or the peer group to which one aspires, to exhibit any interest or enthusiasm for one's endeavors. And there is no shame in that fact. In fact, such failures constitute the primary engine of social invention in Western societies. How is that so? Let's think about the academy. And let's think about the National Academy of Science, or whatever it was, in Einstein's time. Right? And you think about Einstein. What did Einstein discover? And what is he noted for?
General relativity.
Well, that's not the first thing he was noted for.
Special relativity.
That's not the first thing he was noted for.
Patent office.
What?
The patent office.
No. What was one of the first things that he participated in or were actually confirmed?
Oh, atom? No.
Yes, and the presence of molecules, right? But then he went on from there, which many people doubted, by the way, to his theories of relativity, special relativity and general relativity. Most people considered Einstein, those ideas, as sheer quackery. Most of the people in the scientific institutions considered that quackery. Did that stop Einstein? No. He surrounded himself with people who were able to help him construct whatever could be constructed, experiments that empirically verified those concepts or that theory, those theories. On the other hand, you could actually realize that, well, you're actually wrong, right? And you'll say, oh, never mind, I'll go on to something else. So there has to be something like that in order for things to move ahead, I think. Okay, all right, so that's the first issue. Works of art could fail, right? What is the second issue? It suddenly goes from like a 5-word little statement, thing, to a paragraph, right? Second, if art were considered a bad, silly, frivolous thing to do, art professionals, curators, museum directors, and other bureaucratic support workers might cease parading among us like little tin saints, like Mother Teresa among the wretched of Calcutta. And our endeavors would be cleansed of the stink of their unctuous charity. Because if everyone's involvement in the frivolity of art were presumed to be to some extent self-interested, these caregivers would have to accept the obligation of taking care of themselves in pursuance of their own ends.
But
And
isn't-
if these ends were
Sorry.
if these ends were just to hang around with artists and put on shows out of which nothing can sell, they could finance these purportedly public-spirited self-indulgences themselves. What in the world is he talking about? What does this mean?
I don't get that part.
Well, that's why I'm pointing it out.
Because, like, sure, like, whatever, all that. But, like, isn't everybody who works, like, for an art museum or, like, a university for a salary self-interested if they're, like, in it to make a living?
I don't think that's exactly what he's talking about. Well, he goes on and talks about that. The very next paragraph says something about this.
But, like, what I'm saying is, isn't that, like, the way things already are?
Well, he's
Not just the
talking
way
about
churches
that,
are.
but he's saying that, that's one of the bad things. But if art were considered differently, that perhaps wouldn't exist. He was saying this would abolish a fiction that is nowhere confirmed in my experience, that the art world is divided into selfish commercial people
Oh, I see.
and selfless art people. I mean, how many times have you heard this, right? Oh, the commercialization of art. And then, artists are the selfless people. Oh, the one that create. Well, it's exactly the opposite, isn't it? Now, turn the clock back once again and think about Beethoven's time. Lichnowsky, Lobkowitz, who are some of the others? Razumovsky, Van Swieten, not only Beethoven's supporter, but Mozart's, right? What about those people?
Selfless commercial people.
Well, Lobkowitz and Razumovsky and Lichnowsky, those were like nobles, right? Wasn't Van Swieten also some noble aristocracy? A noble pine? No. How does this relate to this? Put on shows out of which nothing can sell. They could did they sponsor that music so it could sell?
No.
No. They gave money so that the things could be performed. They bought the manuscripts, they owned the music, and they produced public shows so that the works of art could be exposed. The works of Beethoven could be exposed to the public.
But are you saying they were doing that because they liked them? not because they were trying to like,
It's out of self-interest.
yeah.
Is it any clearer?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, that's his second point, all right? And that's a big, 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 big point, okay? Now, wait a minute. Do we look at music that way today in the classical world? If you answer in the way that I'm talking about, you know, Lobkowitz and Lichnowsky, do you look at it that way? Does the world look at it that way? No, absolutely not.
Well, because the people that would be like, you know, the modern equivalent of those patrons aren't investing in classical music as much.
But even the people that invest in music, what are they investing in? See, this is a very, very complex issue, and you have to think about it carefully. I've thought about it for years.
They're investing in their own image a lot of the time. Well, I mean, for instance,
Image in the sense of brand.
like, well, no, like, let's talk like private funding of art. Well, if there's excess of money, you have to, you know, you can put it somewhere and get a tax write-off. So it's not really any giving anything. You're not losing out. But so that then the question is where am I gonna place this, and like where I choose to place this money has an impact on how I'm perceived by the world of culture. Like it could. I mean, there are people that do it out of genuine interest or devotion to what's being made, or it could be that it's an investment in their own image, like I'm a donor of this thing and that this represents my value, or like what my level of culture, or like what I, you know, it's like a label kind of.
Well, there's another side to that, I also think. Isn't there the institutional, what is the institutional side of that? And remember, this is a discussion, right? And it's a really important one.
I think it's hard to generalize too, because I think there's a lot of people that really genuinely care as well about like keeping art like that they love alive, you know?
That's a very traditional view.
Yeah.
I'm not certain that is the general view or the leading view.
Well, yeah, me neither, but for instance, for orchestral music, it's really expensive. So there's no way of, it's hard to, yeah, like in order to produce a concert of orchestral music.
Hasn't it always been expensive?
Has it, or hasn't it? Or what would you say?
Well, hasn't it always been expensive?
Mhm.
Music is expensive. Opera is enormously expensive. I mean, there's a bit of reading between the lines that I want you to do here, but I mean, I think it's a huge problem, and it has to do with the parameters of socialization. And they don't seem to be, as Hickey points out, they don't seem to be in kind of perspective. There's a difference. All right, and the third point. Finally, if art were considered a bad, silly, frivolous thing to do, I could practice art criticism by participating in the street-level negotiation of value. I might disregard the distinctions between high art and low art, and discuss objects and activities whose private desirability might be taken to have positive public consequences. What do you think about that? So what is he saying that his role is as a critic? Well, I could practice criticism by participating in the street level negotiation of values. What is the street level?
Money? You know, how much
Just
you
what
can
you
sell.
say to the person,
What?
or just telling someone that's good.
Or
Say
having a
it's bad.
discussion with them
Yeah.
about it. Say, well, hey, I think this piece sucks, right? What do you think? Oh, no, I think it's really great, and I like it when it does this and this and this and that, right? So there's a discussion. So who is involved in that? That kind of criticism?
Anyone.
Anyone. Who's essentially involved in, I won't mention any names, but music criticism at the New Yorker. Who's involved in that?
One person.
Well, I know, but is that one person involved in the street level conversations? N-O. Right?
Do people still read that?
Nice.
Don't you read the New Yorker?
Some people do.
No. I read an article
wish.
in the
You do?
No, I wish. Be very sophisticated.
Well, I
Do you think it's
maybe
very
maybe the
sophisticated?
street level negotiation now is like, you know, the public forums and the internet. You know, I think actually that's like one positive thing is that people feel really free to say whatever they want.
Well, yeah, but I mean, did the art critics and the music critics listen to those public forums?
Well, I recently read, or I read a recent review of music criticism from the New York Times and decided I was never going to read it again. So, no.
But isn't he saying something bigger than all of that? It's like, because art is inherently like elevated, there can't really be a discussion about it because it's perceived for its like, I don't know, unctuous charity or whatever.
But that's an attitude that's been ascribed to it.
I think
Right.
he's saying that like the fact that there is like professional art and music criticism is the reason for the problem, because anybody who seeks out that kind of criticism to read it is like sort of like admitting that like they're not worthy of making a judgment about the art or music on their own.
Yeah, but hasn't that been something that has been a process of bad socialization?
I don't know.
It's like
I
a-
mean, what kind of people become art critics
That-
or music critics?
Yeah, but I really do believe that there has been criticism of works of art forever. Now, that's about all I'm going to say about this.
I have a question.
Yes,
So
just one?
when we look at like the range of art production or music production from like the youth chorus at the high school or whatever to like a professional ensemble, the concept of street level negotiation or discussion or whatever, like isn't that directly related to like the amount of skill? Do you know what I mean? Like if there's a music review in the New Yorker, like it's presumably like a professional ensemble,
Yeah.
and the people that are gonna read it are people that like hopefully know things about music. I don't know, like isn't there a natural correlation?
But he's saying that that's not natural. He's saying that it has precipitated into or catalyzed into this, territory where it's impossible for art to have these kind of, genuine relationships to socialization processes.
Sure, but I can't understand a scenario where that wouldn't be the case. Like it wouldn't like naturally stratify.
Someone wants to be an artist. They start producing art and they show it, get it out there. People talk about it and they say, I don't like it.
Sure.
A critic says, was looking at it and They base their opinion on what the street level thing is. Part of the street level criticism is it selling? Is there any kind of, is there a mercantile aspect of it? Is there some private person that's buying this art? And it used to be, one of his big things is that in the 60s and the 70s, when the art market in America was very vibrant, and that's during the period where abstract expressionism or non-representational, I think that's a nonsense word, but the abstractionists like Rothko and de Kooning and Pollock and Krasner and you can go on, where those people were working, and their paintings were in these galleries all over the city, and people would go in, and the gallery owners would say, "Hey, look at this, pull this out," and they would talk about it, and you might pay $500 for something. Well, yeah, I like this, but the art market is not like that anymore.
Why, I think that's a reason why what I consider like great art has a timeless quality, like that, because I think it's also dangerous to value something because of a historical, for like historical value or for other reasons other than the direct contact with the work of art itself. Like, for instance, when I go to an art museum, I don't have a lot of background or knowledge on visual art, and I'm actually kind of glad because I don't read like the text next to it or anything. I just like go and with an open, like, see how I relate to it, and then the ones that I end up in really like connecting with or taking something out of, then I'll go and see, oh, this is the artist that created this, and I'll be interested. And yeah, I'm actually super grateful for that because I didn't have like visual art education growing up, but I had access to go and see it. And
Yeah, well, what does he say that why are works of art in a museum?
yeah, that's
Not because they're historically important, because why are they there?
well, sometimes I think because of they're historically important. Like someone,
Nowadays they are, but
like for instance, a piece by Beethoven, and people will stand up because it's Beethoven, but it wasn't performed well. Like that idea that a piece of art is important because of what it's labeled, not because of what it is. Like, for instance, music.
yeah, but why have those pieces existed?
Well, I
The
guess
Beethoven
tradition.
Second Symphony that we are going to listen to in just a few seconds was composed in 1802, 1902, 2002. How many years is that?
200?
That's older than I am. Right? Why are people still, well, they don't play it anymore, this like ridiculous notion that we will now not play any music written before 1900. We're going to be at least partially contemporary, right? We're going to be pulled into the 20th century, although we're in the 21st century. So we will start with composers who were actually born in the 19th century, but may have been wrote pieces in like 1902 or 1907, and they're qualified.
Well,
Right. I have a big problem with that kind of mentality. Right. However, why are things in museums? Why did Beethoven last for 200 years?
well, I think like our appreciation of Beethoven is twofold, because like there is a part of all of us that has been told that Beethoven is great and therefore we must appreciate him, but like there's also like there's something about the music that is like, something I can't explain why or how, but it is like very remarkable and good and like exceptional compared to everything else that was written. And different people may like or dislike Beethoven more or less, but like there is something. Okay, I hit a dead end. I was about to say that there was something inherent in the art that makes
No, I don't think
but
so. I think that
don't
we
think
have
that's-
to be realistic and say the work of art lasts because
Yeah.
people like it. Well, then you ask the question,
Yeah.
why do people like it?
Well, what about Bach? People didn't. Well, it was more a question of not knowing about the not liking for a long time.
What, Bach?
Yeah, he was like, well, he wasn't fully appreciated in his own time, perhaps, and then he wasn't really known or performed at all for such a long time.
I thought he was known.
Didn't
for that as a
Beethoven,
study
didn't
piece.
Beethoven regularly play the well-tempered clavier? Wasn't Beethoven's reputation built on that of an improviser and a pianist?
Yeah, maybe.
He very well knew the well-tempered clavier of Bach.
I think it's about platform and what artists choose to do with it once they have the platform. Like
What is
a
that?
platform,
An
like
institutional support?
or it doesn't need to be that. That's one type of platform, but reaching people.
Mm.
I think like there's so many instances of people with platform that don't like it doesn't make any dent on the culture like in any significant way, and then there are the people that it clearly does and lasts for a long time after, like Beethoven.
Like, yeah, it might be brilliant, but nobody knows
So I
about
think
it.
it's more about it says more, almost the most about the artist.
Yeah, but isn't Hickey saying that that is an aspect of the process of socialization? Yeah?
Yeah.
And there are many factors that go into that. The mercantile aspect, right? Then notice that the institutional one is the last one that he's highly critical of. But there are other things, that private, mercantile, whatever,
Here's a
right?
question.
Those are,
Does the inherent value of a piece of art or music, does that depend on the number of people that have enjoyed it and that it is appealed to? Like, is a piece of art or music, like, have more value, like,
the
in
more
relation
people
to, like, the
listen
more
to.
people? Is that what
No,
you're
I
saying?
don't
Okay.
think that's what he's saying at
Okay.
all. However, people, you have two pieces of music. One, a lot of people listen to, and the other one, nobody listens to. Well, does that mean that the one that everybody's listened to is a better piece?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, but it's the one that people remember, right? So it is a kind of a barometer of value in a certain sense. But he keeps saying that all of those things are extrinsic to the work of art itself. Yeah? If you ever have a chance, you should listen to some lectures on WeTube by Steven Weinberg. He's a physicist. Someone asked him, well, what is the point of the universe? And, in his the look only he can get on his face, right? He said, what do you mean? What is the point? There is no point. Human beings make points.
But what about it gets a little complicated too when we talk about like the concept of an icon or an image like of the artist, like aside from the art being produced, like what does that say when people, like that's another aspect of it as well.
Well, that's a psychological construction, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
that
extrinsic to
that
the
also
work of
affects-
art.
But that also affects like the perception of the work.
Well, it can, and it can do a great deal of damage.
Or
I mean, look at the prejudices that have accrued around Wagner's works. And his presumed association, I don't see how this is possible, but his presumed association with Nazi Germany. This is the argument that I had around the table with a very, well-known artist the other night. When they asked me, did music or art, can music or art change society? And my answer was very quick and very short. What do you think I said?
Yes.
No. Absolutely not. And that, everybody became, I told you, there's porcupines, right? What do you mean by that? You can make it you can force it to be like that. But intrinsically it is not. Has nothing to do with that.
Well, then why should we focus on the intrinsics at all?
What?
We're looking at the, because I think that art is as much the extrinsic associations with it as it is its own intrinsic existence.
Well, would it not be, we wouldn't have anything, we wouldn't know anything about these works of art if it were not subject to some kind of socialization process, yes?
Yes.
But it has nothing to do with the work of art itself.
No, but it's completely tied to it. Just because it doesn't have anything to do with the actual art and the
It
actual thing on
doesn't-
the canvas, it doesn't mean that the social.
If it becomes, sorry for interrupting, if it becomes in the canon of whatever, right, it is tied to it. But what if it is not tied to it, and it is, a work of art that is on equal stature as something that has been tied to that? I think there are works of art that exist like that.
Absolutely, but the thing is, as soon as we look at any work of art and we make an association or we make a judgment about it, that's an extrinsic property of the art. We've created a judgment that in some way, minuscule or huge, changes the way we see things.
Yes, but the works of art that last not because of its intrinsic value, but because of the extrinsic socialization process that goes with it. Then the next step is to investigate, well, what are those components in that process that relates to the individuals who are making assessments about that particular work? That's a completely different thing. And it has to do with something that must be embedded in the work of art.
What is that thing?
I don't know. I do know. I do know what the basis of such things are. But time is flying. So let's listen to this. Okay, you ready? You can give it over to him. He's the professional.
It's not.
Is that machine on in the back of?
Yes.
Whose is this?
We need a password.
What?
Is this yours?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Password?
You know what it is.
No. 1, 2, 3, 4.
No. Okay, and we need to go to YouTube, and we're going to listen to the Mengelberg 1943 recording of the Beethoven Second Symphony. Is it there?
Yeah, from the first movement?
Yes.
Oh wait, 1943? Is this not the one?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Keep going?
Yeah. everyone knows how that goes, all right? And so if this piece is in D major, right? What is that introduction? What does that do? What's the basic design of that introduction? Do you remember?
Dominant.
5-1.
It goes to B flat,
Yeah.
right? And that's not in D major. What's B flat?
D minor.
D minor, yeah. Okay? And it eventually then goes from the B flat down to A and then to what? D minor, yeah? And then suddenly that is, or eventually that's transformed into a motion back up to the A, right, which is the fifth boundary of D, and then it all very beautifully collides to the exposition proper in D. And all right, so I want to skip all that. You've heard the Beethoven the Second Symphony 5,000 times, I'm sure. So I would like to skip to the, it's somewhere around minute 11 or something like that.
Minute 11, like in the intro?
What?
As in the intro, a minute and 11?
No, 11 minutes
Oh.
into the first movement.
Sorry. Sure thing. I'll just start.
Proper 11 minutes.
Here it is. Stop. Okay. All right, this is the coda from the first movement. I put this on the conducting exam just to see what these various and sundry conductors might think about this, right? And I think it is a perplexing and enormously difficult passage. Sounds really great, doesn't it? Play it once again from where we were,
Sure.
where I told you.
Yes.
It's D, right? The piece is over, right? Okay? That everything has come crashing to like a D octave, right? Okay, so now let's go from there. Now we'll go now to the blackboard, and it's your turn to participate in this socialization process.
From where we started off, or from?
No,
where we
right
stopped?
there. You're gonna have to go back and forth. So I've got this, and I've got that. All right, the other thing is that I believe that you must be able to hear music as a kind of composite register. And you have to be able to hear it in a kind of kernel form. And so all these registers are obviously adjusted, right? But I'm trying to figure out what is exactly motivating this music. What might your mind be doing, not your ear, your mind might be doing when you hear this upcoming passage, right? And I'm not sure that anyone has any kind of conscious knowledge of what it is. You know, John is too angry to eat. Right? And unless you're in some like cannibalistic society, you know, it means that he's too upset so he's not going to eat anything. You don't have to think twice about that. Because certainly unless you're a cannibal, you don't look at it the other way. John is too angry, so we're not going to eat him. right? Which it could be interpreted that way. You're not aware that your grammar just does that instinctively. Music is operating in that same way. Must be. Okay, let's go. Play. Stop. Okay. All right. What has happened to this little D major chord?
Well, the D stays in the bass.
Right? So you don't you have this? Yes? Okay. Now let's put some notes in here. Remember, when I get to the blackboard, I go crazy. Okay, so that's 7, right? Now
What
just
about the-
back it up to, what?
Oop, the O.
What about that?
What about it?
Is that important?
No,
Okay.
no, not important. All right?
Incomplete.
Not as important as the mess that's going to follow this, okay? Stop. Okay, all right. Now, what happens next?
Goes to
Goes to
A.
E flat.
I don't have an ear.
I don't either.
It could go to an E flat, right? And does that top note stay the same?
Yep.
Okay, we're thinking about this abstractly, right? Don't think about the literal disposition of pitches. I want just this. And so what happens here? We've got the same notes, right? Okay? Okay. Now, let's go for a while. Go back. Okay, all right. Anyone care to explain any of that?
We keep the fa.
Is this a consonant chord?
No.
No. Is that consonant?
No.
What is the next sonority that you hear? No, don't sing pitches. Give me the figured bass. What is it? What?
Natural.
6/4.
It's a 6/4. Is that consonant?
No.
No. What's the next chord?
Another 6/4.
5/3.
Well, the bass
No.
moves up front, right?
5/3.
Let's play it again. No.
The bass just moves grammatically.
Sorry.
All right, hold on. All right. You have to listen carefully because the violin's sawing away kind of obscure what's here.
It stays. the
Listen to
same.
it again, one more time. One more time, then I will. Okay, all right, all right, all right, all right, all right.
Sorry,
Okay,
pause it.
so after this diminished 7, right, there's a what?
6/4.
There's a
A minor
6/4, right? Isn't that it?
Yep.
Okay, and then there is what?
F natural la do. Is that that? Or is it just 5/3?
It's an E flat in it, right?
What is a 7?
Yes. Okay, I'm going to put this E flat up here, right? And let's do that, right?
Okay.
Okay, so somehow that E flat gets up. Oh dear, right? Okay,
And then the bass moves to F sharp.
then what happens? That goes here, and this becomes a diminished 7, yes? So we might say that that's a 7, and this is a diminished 7, yeah?
Wait, does the top voice actually move to E
No,
flat on
not
the F
until the
natural?
next. Not until the next.
No, but no, I'm saying don't listen to that, right? Those are transpositions. I'm trying to get the basic pattern of this, right? And this isn't even the basic pattern yet. Where are the consonant chords in this? Is that consonant? Well, thank goodness, yes. But it's quickly turned into a seventh, yes? Then there's a diminished seventh. Then there is a 6/4. Then there is a seventh. Then there is another diminished seventh. It seems like to me that violates all of my 300 pages of my book that says you must always have consonants, dissonance, consonants, dissonant, consonants. You must always have that. If you don't have it, it's either incoherent or you don't know what it's doing. Well, I think this is pretty coherent. So obviously we might not know exactly what's happening here. Right. May we continue on through this?
Sure. From the beginning.
Wait a minute. What's the next 6/4?
Sol, flat,
Throw mine here.
sol.
G, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay, and then what? That has to be a seventh, yes, right? So this is G flat. Yep.
Mhm.
And then this obviously is going to turn into like that, right? Have I got wrong accidental here?
Maybe respell it.
Yes. Right? Okay, and then what do you think is going to be next?
6/4. B flat.
B flat? Okay. And that's going to be what?
6/4.
And what's going to be on the top?
Sol flat.
What?
Sol flat.
Mm-hmm. Okay. 6/4, and then what else?
We're going to C flat.
La,
And then.
Uh-oh, we have a spelling issue here, right?
Oh.
la, very sharp.
But let's just respell it, okay?
Yeah, right here.
And then A on the top, right? And then this becomes, uh-oh, what?
C, well, do.
Yeah, we have to do a respelling here, right?
Yeah, so do,
Very sharp.
B flat, G flat, sol flat. No,
Very sharp.
no.
This remains the same, but you have to spell it as a what?
Oh, would there be a lot of like double?
Maybe we shouldn't do this.
Well,
Let's do this.
are we sure that's what happens next? Cause didn't we stop before?
Yeah, well, I'm saying that might happen. Let's do it again. Play it again. Right, stop right there. I think that's do sharp, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do we put up here?
Fa sharp, do sharp, la.
Right, 6/4, and then what else? That would go on up to, right? What? Let's do. Wow, is that right? Yeah. No. That's a seventh, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then something strange happens here. Do I have all the accidentals correctly? Please help me.
Would it be
Okay.
a Ray sharp in the treble clef?
Back 3 notes in that trim.
Oh no, never mind.
Are we right so far? All right,
Maybe
play it
A
again.
natural sign on the 7th? Or no?
What, here? Uh-oh. All right, that does not go to another diminished seventh, does it? What does it go to?
D sharp.
Suspension.
This comes down, right?
6/5.
And it's a 6/5, is it not? So C, Fa sharp,
La.
no, this is wrong.
La.
Yep. And what?
C.
Right, right, so that's 6/5, okay. Something, is this right? Yeah, okay, all right. So let's look at the bass line first. Play it once again.
From the
This
beginning.
time, only listen to the bass. Right there. All right, wait. That's a diminished seventh, yes? Okay? All right, so let's look at the bass line. Play it again. That's actually like a D sharp. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Stop. Okay. All right. Doesn't this go through a sequence of diminished sevenths? Right? What is the bass doing?
Ascending.
That's a D sharp, right? You have to think of that as a D sharp, right? Okay, where's the next diminished seventh? It's right there, right? Where's the next diminished seventh? It's right there.
Every three
Right.
chords.
And where's the next one?
The
B sharp.
C sharp.
The C sharp, what?
B.
Solfege, C sharp.
Yeah, I think so.
Where?
Right? Yeah.
Dope.
It would be like do, right?
It's a pattern.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the chord, right? Okay, so there are complicated issues of spelling here, yeah? When you hear this, you're not aware of that. It just sounds like sequential, yeah? Okay, all right, so essentially, what is the bass doing? This is what is so revolutionary about Beethoven. This is why I picked this piece, and it's why I picked Beethoven and skipped Mozart and whatever else comes between Haydn and Beethoven.
Essentially, it's just D the entire way. 'Cause
Spell this chord. D sharp, F sharp, A, C natural. Isn't that this chord?
yeah.
Right? So, what is this passage then?
Big expansion of.
It's a horizontalization of this dissonant chord. Yeah? Well, how can that be?
Because it is.
You can't compose out a dissonant chord unless you turn it into some kind of consonants. But that's what this is. This is a composed out diminished seventh chord, right? Now, you can't do that directly because it wouldn't make any sense. You already see the spelling things that are problematic in this. When you listen to it, there's none of those problems. That is why any theoretical approach to this that is tied to the notational aspect has a chance of, having a flat tire really, really quickly. That was the issue in that Haydn quartet example. There is no way that diminished seventh chord, Do sharp, Mi, Sol, C flat, can be respelled as a chord that's going to F major. Didn't we talked about this last week. If you do that, you belong to Cirque du Soleil or the Ringling Brothers, right? High Trapeze Act. Right? You have to do so many contortions, and then it leads to the wrong chord. Right? You remember that, right? In that whole tirade that I gave last week. Well, all right, there are many things that are missing in this. Okay? And here we go. All right. First of all, this is that chord with a seventh on it. Yeah? Okay. So that has to be a passing tone. The next chord must be consonant. Well, if we take this as a consonant point of origin, then these two chords, as is the diminished seventh, belong together. This is nothing but an inflection of this chord, right? It's a chromaticization. So this is the dissonant sonority, these two things. By changing this to D sharp, right, you produce the diminished seventh. That's the only thing, well, that is a natural, yep? So there are two alterations here, yep? Okay, well, technically, if you have this diminished seventh, which is D sharp, not E flat, right? Probably in the score it's notated E flat. It makes absolutely no sense, because where does this chord go to?
E natural.
Where would it, what is the consonant sonority that this chord goes to? Well, obviously it goes to an E, but it can't go to a 6/4 chord. It's got to go where? It has to go there, right? So it must go to this 5/3 here, right? Well then, how do you get from that to the next chord? If this is true, what is the relationship between the E minor chord and this sound that's on, literally on the E? What? 5 to 6, yes. So this becomes a 5 to 6, and that's so much fun. We're going to move that up, right? Okay, so that it becomes like a 6/4. Right, well, now that becomes consonant. You don't hear that, 5/3. Then the 6/4 is the dissonance. Well, there must be a consonant chord that follows this. And what is it?
The one with F in the base?
E to what? F. Right. So this goes to F. These two tones remain the same. Right? If you do that, you have parallel octaves, but who cares? Right? Okay. Then how do you get this chord? This is why I put the E flat on top. This F moves up an octave, right? And then you have an 8/7. So there it is. Consonance, dissonance. You follow this? This is the origin of this progression, right? You don't hear these intervening contractions. And if you don't hear them, or you don't understand them, then you don't, this passage doesn't make any sense at all. Right? You following that? Now, I will tell you, you will never hear this explanation from anyone except for me. Right? Now, there are some that would say, oh, you're making this all up. Well, how is it that you have this procession of dissonant sounds and it makes perfect sense? You don't think it sounds strange, do you? Well, maybe a little strange, but it makes perfect sense. And so what has happened in the course of this is that this chord is expanded. Is that me?
Yeah.
Just leave- no,
I'll just mute it.
Okay. So this chord is expanded, right, as a diminished seventh. But that's an impossibility. It emerges through these successive elisions and progressions up chromatically by half step. Yeah? And the 6/4s must imply a movement up to the root position, the 5/3. That's not heard. This is transferred up, which introduces the seventh over this. That seventh is chromaticized and turned into a diminished seventh. Then this must move to what? Diatonically, I would vote for this, right?
Oh,
The G major 5/3,
yeah.
right? And there's the 6/4 again, okay? And this has to move to what? B flat major, right? Okay?
So like a move to a 5/3 before every 6/4
Yes.
chord is implied, and
Yes.
that's how we get the 6/4 chords.
Yes,
So every time that happens.
yes.
Okay.
It's sequential, right? And the B flat is from the minor mode, yes? each one of these chords, let's go to the 5-3. This, where's the 5-3? Here. This is a what? An E minor chord?
Yeah.
Right. But, yes, because that's not an E flat. Probably in the score it is, but that's actually D sharp. All right, I'm finished with that. All right, so this is E. That's in the key of D major, right? The 2 in the D major, second degree. Right, this would be what? Major,
Yeah.
right? It would be the 4th degree, right? And then the next thing, that's borrowed from minor, yes? D minor, right? Well, what about this? Isn't that that would have to be a Do sharp chord, right?
So,
Is it major or minor?
no.
That doesn't exist in either D major or D minor. If it has a C sharp, it's got to be major, but that would force it to a diminished triad, right? Okay, well, we might look at it that way, right? So it'd be diminished, moving to the minor 6/4, yeah? If you're going to be strictly diatonic about it, yeah? Okay? All right, and then in the last rising progression from the 7th, right, you don't actually have a motion to another diminished 7th. This, if you were to go to the diminished 7th, this would do what?
Go to D sharp or very sharp.
That would go to D sharp,
Yeah.
right? It does go to D sharp. The bass does, right? But what about the upper voice?
Bass.
Would be a C solfege C sharp.
No, B natural, right?
Wait.
Re, Fa, La, Si, yeah? Yeah?
What was the diminished 7th?
No, it's not a diminished 7th.
So confused.
That's where the line breaks.
Okay.
And this goes to like B,
Okay.
right? And then E, right? Right? And then C sharp. Does it go to A? Yes.
Yes.
And then D, right? And then there is the cadence. D, B, G, A, D. Yep? Okay. And the piece is over with. Are you following this? Okay. So this is a gigantic prolonged diminished 7th chord, which actually originates in the D major chord. Now, the piece is over with here because you have arrived at the 1st degree. The coda actually starts a little bit before this, but unequivocally, the octave is articulated here. Let's listen to the passage one more time. Right, that sound, wait a minute,
That's what's.
that sound, the ones that you're talking about, that's a pedal over that D, yes?
Yeah.
And so what is the dissonant note in that?
Do.
E flat.
What? Play it one more time. What is it?
Do.
What? What's the dissonant note over that, over the pedal?
Has to be the 7th.
Bum, bum.
Oh, so there's 2 dissonant notes, E flat and Do.
Yeah, right? Those are borrowed from what?
F sharp diminished.
Well, seems like they're part of whatever's composed out in this passage.
Is that an E flat?
No.
It's a D sharp, isn't it? Okay, or something like that, right? And it kind of anticipates this in the bass. All right, now let's listen to the whole thing. we can talk about the literal soprano that's there. Once we have this worked out, let's play it once again and you'll hear what happens. From the do, right? Doesn't the do start this? There's what interval that's arpeggiated?
Minor third.
Mhm.
Do, do.
Yeah, but it goes up to la, yes?
B flat.
Yeah, it goes to B flat first.
What?
Well, it goes to, oh, sorry, I was thinking the next interval that it goes
All
up
the
to.
way here.
Yeah,
It's
sorry.
a diminished chord.
Goes to A,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Listen to it one more time. So, essentially what happens here? Re, la, sol, fa, mi, re. Yep.
Right.
Okay, so that's a fifth progression. And you get to that by the transfer of the notes in this diminished seventh chord. Right? Okay, all originating in this D. Right? And then as it comes down to the final cadence, right? Since there can be no definitive closure except from 3, that's what you hear.
And the suspensions in the top voice don't mean anything.
This is what?
The suspensions in the top voice.
What suspension?
The
The 4 3s?
Whatever they are, I
No. The suspensions are always on the surface.
Okay.
They're never part of anything structural. How could a dissonance be a part of, a literal dissonance be a part of the structural element? A transformed dissonance could be, but not a literal dissonance, right? So this is all like, on the surface, right? But you have to show the alternation of consonants, dissonance throughout, and it operates that way. There can be no exceptions to that. If it is, it's chaos. I'm telling you, right? That's the way that music works, and that tells you that there's something underneath the process of music that makes it generative or makes it hierarchical and recursive. This is a recursive passage that results in the transformation of consonants into dissonance, or the movement of consonants and dissonance in between like that, right? Inside of one actual dissonant sonority. That's an illusion. Are you okay? I think it's the most amazing passage ever. And one of like thousands in Beethoven. And this is the thing that Wagner was so interested in Beethoven about. This is why there is a direct connection between Beethoven and Wagner. And it has to do with the use of chromaticism. Yep. And Wagner tried his best as his youth to imitate Beethoven in his first 2 symphonies, which he said, heck, I can't do that. But I'm going to take this from it, and I'm going to go my own way. And that is how he overcame Beethoven and moved to the next step. Brahms chose another route. He essentially said, I can't overcome this, so I'm just going to do more of it. That's not pejorative. It's just a fact, right? So the difference between those 2 men, who are the greatest people at the end of the 19th century, are actually doing basically the same thing, right? One very much in the kind of contrapuntal, imitative, polyphonic style the Viennese masters, not the second Viennese masters, but the 18th century ones, right? And Wagner said, oh, forget that. I'm just going to use this in a creative way. Although Wagner is not abandoning any of these principles. Okay? Fantastic. Now I wanted to do a final work of Kahlo, and we'll probably do that next week. So thank you for your attention, and don't get nervous and don't make mistakes. Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, me.
I got you.